Hey guys, Sam here and welcome to another FIFA 17 experiment. Today's video is a video that you guys have wanted to see. Now I can't credit one subscriber for this because this has been commented a lot. Since we started doing these experiments, so many people have wanted to do this and I'm finally getting around to doing it. We have all the Champions League winners, even back when it was called the European Cup, in the same league. And it's worked out because there's 22 different Champions League winners. But two of those teams are not in FIFA, being Red Star Belgrade and Steaua Bucuresti. So those two teams obviously can't be in this league, leaving us with a 20-team league. If you guys do go on to enjoy today's video, I do urge you to leave a like on it. If you're new around here, why not subscribe? This is something that you guys wanted to see, so I need you to smash out the support, but this is just proof that some of your ideas are turning into videos. So do take to the comment section below if you have any more ideas, and they will definitely be joining my list, which is full of a lot of ideas. So there's videos to come. Before we do actually get into the simulation of the league, we're going to do a little bit of a introduction to each team, their record in Champions League finals and how many they've won. And then we'll get into the actual season simulation. So without further ado, let's take a look at the teams that are among the elite, among a prestigious group of 22 teams that have been kings of Europe. Okay, starting things off with Celtic, who have a record of 1-1 in Champions League finals. They won their Champions League in 1967. Hamburg also have a record of 1-1. They won their Champions League title in 1983. Marseille, who are actually the only French team to win a Champions League, won theirs in 1993, and they also have a record of 1-1. They won their Champions League in 1993, 2 years after failing to win it in 1991. Borussia Dortmund, who most recently you would remember lost a Champions League final in 2013, actually won a Champions League final in 1997. Chelsea, who have been involved in 2 Champions League finals with 1 win and 1 loss. In 2008, they were the runners-up, and 4 years later, they amended that loss. They got the win and their first ever Champions League trophy in 2012. I think we all remember that. It's pretty much Drogba's Champions League, that one. Feyenoord have a 1-0 record in Champions League finals. The only one they were involved in, they won, and that was back in 1970. Similarly, Aston Villa are undefeated in Champions League finals, mainly because they've only been in one, and they won theirs in 1982. And PSV Eindhoven joins these two teams with a 1-0 record in 1988. It has to be said that Red Star Belgrade have a 1-0 record. They won theirs in 1991, and Steaua Bucuresti have a 1-1 record. They won theirs in 1986 and were runners-up in 1989. I still wanted to talk about these teams despite them not actually being in the tournament. Moving over to the 2-time winners, and we begin with Juventus, who have a record of 2-6 going into this year's Champions League. So that could be a really... They have lost the most Champions League finals. They came runners-up in 1973 and 1983 before winning their first Champions League in 1985. They then backed that up 11 years later, winning the title again in 1996. And then they were runners-up in 97 and 98. So they were involved in 3 straight Champions League finals. They made another appearance in the Champions League final and lost in 2003, and their most recent loss was 2015, and that's only at the time of this recording. That's either going to be 3-6 or 2-7 come the end of the season and come the Champions League finals. So Juventus, you gotta level out that win-loss record just a little bit. Moving on to Benfica, a team that's lost in 5 Champions League finals. However, they kicked off their Champions League final record fantastically with actually going up 2-0. They won it in 1961 and 62, but were then runners-up in 63. They also featured in the 65 and 68 finals, which again, they both lost. But over the span of 7 years, were involved in 5 Champions League finals, which is an amazing effort. They also went on to lose the 1988 and 1990 Champions League finals, so their record is just a little bit better than Juventus's. And the only 2 teams to actually win the Champions League multiple times and be undefeated in finals are Nottingham Forest, who won it in 1979 and 1980, and FC Porto, who won it in 87 and 04. neither of those teams have lost a Champions League final. Moving on to the 3-time winners, we begin with Internazionale. Inter Milan won their first Champions League in 1964. They then backed up this effort by winning it in 65 as well, however were runners-up in 67. 5 years later, they made it to the final again and lost, and then didn't feature for 28 years until they won it under Jose Mourinho in 2010, ending their Champions League final record at 3-2. Another team with a 3-2 record in Champions League finals is Manchester United, winning their first one way back in 1968, and it was a long time before they saw another Champions League final in 1999, one of the most famous Champions League finals, where they won it against Bayern Munich by scoring 2 goals in the dying embers of the game. Another 9 years later, Manchester United went 3-0 in Champions League finals, winning the 2008 Champions League final, but since then have lost 2 Champions League finals in 2009 and 2011. Moving on to the only 4-time winner of this tournament, and that is Ajax. Their first Champions League final was a defeat in 1969, but bounced back amazingly, winning the 71, 72, and 73 final. However, they didn't see another Champions League final for 22 years, where they won it in 95 and then lost it in 96. So they end with a 4-2 record. Next up is Bayern Munich. They've been involved in the 3rd most amount of Champions League finals. They won it in 74, 75, and 76. They then went on to lose the 82, 87 and 99 final, so they were 3-3 at that point. They then won it in 2001, lost it in 2010, lost it in 2012, and won it in 2013, 5-5 for a Champions League record. They're so far in this list the only team that have featured in every single decade in a Champions League final since their first one in 74. So they featured in a 70s one, they featured in an 80s final, they finished in a 90s final, they finished in a 2000s and a 2010s final. So they've been in finals across 5 decades now since their first one in 74. An amazing feat for Bayern Munich, one of the staples of the Champions League. Another 5-time winner of the Champions League is FC Barcelona, with a little bit cleaner of a record. However, they started off their finals campaign with a loss in 1961, and it actually took them 25 years to get back into a Champions League final, which they lost again in 1986. They then made up for that 6 years later in 92, where they won their first ever Champions League, and in 94 they again lost it. However, they went on an amazing streak between 2006 and 2015, winning it in 06, 09, 2011 and 2015, and they end with a 5-3 record. Another team that has 5 Champions League to their names is Liverpool. They won the 77, 78, 81 and 84 Champions League finals. 4-0 they were at that point. However, in 1985 they lost their first ever Champions League final, and it took them 20 years to get back into a Champions League final, where they were able to win it in 2005 and 2 years later lose it in 2007, and they end with a 5-2 record. Other than undefeated teams, Liverpool actually has the 2nd best win-loss percentage in a Champions League final, and everybody pretty much knows who number 1 is. But before we get to the best performing European team, we have to talk about AC Milan, the 2nd most prestigious team when it comes to the UEFA Champions League or the European Cup. Their first final was in 1958, which they lost, but they then won the 63, 69, 89 and 90 Champions League finals before losing it in 93 and 95. They then won it again in 03, lost it in 05 and won it in 2007, and have not featured in a final since 2007. So this marks 10 years without AC Milan being in a Champions League final, but undoubtedly one of the greatest teams to ever grace the European Cup / UEFA Champions League. AC Milan are the 2nd best team when it comes to European competition. And you guessed it, it's not difficult to guess it. Real Madrid are the best performing European team with 11 wins and 3 losses. An amazing feat for them, and that could be 12-3 come the end of the season. It could even be 11-4, but either way, this team is absolute insanity. They won the 56, 57, 58, 59, and 1960 European Cup finals. That's 5 years in a row. They then lost their first ever final in 62, and then they lost their second final in 64, but they also backed that up by winning it in 66. And believe it or not, it was actually 15 years after 1966 until they made it back into the Champions League final in 1981, which they lost. And that was their last Champions League final loss. 1981. 36 years ago was the last time Real Madrid lost a Champions League final. They've since then won the 98, 2000, 2002, 2014 and 2016 finals, making them the best performing team in Europe and surely one of the greatest clubs of all time. Now we're going to see how these teams go head to head. Obviously without Red Star Belgrade and Steaua Bucuresti, without those teams, who's going to perform? Who's going to step up in a league format? So without further ado, let's take a look at halfway through the season and let's see which of these teams are doing well in a head-to-head league with other Champions League winners. This is like a club that only the cool kids are invited to. So let's see who's the coolest of cool. Let's see who's the king of cool. Alright, so halfway through the season, it's Juventus, this year's finalists, who are currently sitting in first, 3 points ahead of Borussia Dortmund. Chelsea are up there as well, but they're tied on points with Manchester United and Benfica. And then Porto's right behind Benfica, so the Portuguese teams are actually performing quite well. You got Bayern up there as well, Barcelona, Liverpool, Aston Villa, cheeky little 10th from Aston Villa, PSV, Hamburg, Milan, Inter, Ajax, Marseille, Nottingham Forest, Celtic, and Feyenoord. And you might be asking, well, where's Real Madrid? Where's the most successful team in European finals? Where's the team that's won 11 of these? They're last. They're last, guys. 2 wins, 7 draws, 10 losses by 4 points. They're last. Keep in mind they've played every team in the league at this point. So they've come up against Aston Villa. They've come up against Nottingham Forest. They've come up against Celtic. They've come up against Ajax. They've come up against Hamburg. And I'm not saying all those teams are on the same level, but they're teams that Madrid should be beating 100% of the time. Even Feyenoord. Let's not even forget Feyenoord as well. PSV, if I didn't already mention them. How have they only picked up 2 wins? How is... This is... I'm sorry if I'm overreacting. I'm sorry if this is really annoying, but... How have they only picked up 2 wins? This is the most shocking thing I've ever seen in any of our sim tournaments. This, right here, Madrid. And I know there's always random shit happening, but this is too far. EA, you have gone too far. Real Madrid are last. Oh, well, at least we know at the end of the season they won't be, because these leagues just change so much from halfway to end of the season. So at least there's some comfort knowing that they won't finish last. But it's kind of funny how the 2 finalists for this year, one's first and one's last. Is that an omen? Are Juventus going to beat Real Madrid? I think so. What do you guys think? Leave your predictions in the comment section below. I just want Juventus to win it for Gigi. That's it. That's what I want. I want Gigi to hold that trophy. Without further ado, let's take a look at what this league looks like at the end of the season. Okay, so Juventus did not budge. They just stayed first, pretty much. They didn't care. They like, you know what? We're just going to dominate the shit out of this league. I mean, to be fair, they didn't really dominate, but they held that lead against Borussia Dortmund, who seemed to put up a good fight. So the top 2 didn't change. And actually, the point difference between them only changed by 1 point throughout the whole half a season. So that must have been a very entertaining 2-horse race right there. But Bayern was up there as well, and Chelsea as well. Benfica taking 5th place. I thought them and Porto would fall off the face of the planet. Porto kinda did, but Benfica held strong. And they ended up getting 5th spot. Manchester United up there, Barcelona, Liverpool, Inter Milan. Real Madrid got 10th. So, yeah, I don't know. Good on them? I don't know. It's not really good on them. They should be ashamed of their performances in this tournament. Porto in 11th, AC Milan in 12th, Hamburg 13th, Marseille, the only French team in the league, in 14th, Ajax, Feyenoord, and PSV, all the Dutch teams, joint at the hip, coming in 16th, 17th, and 18th, Celtic in 19th, and Aston Villa, all the way dead last in 20th. I'm sorry, Villa. I apologize. In terms of the top goal scorers, it's Coutinho again. He's done it again. He was actually a top goal scorer, I think I'm struggling to remember. I think he was the top goal scorer in the Northwest League that we did. I think he was the top goal scorer there. and he's done it again with 18 goals, but Kostic with a decent performance of 15 goals, and then a massive, just a long list of players who scored 14 goals, including Hazard, Bastos, Kodja, who a lot of people seem to love, De Poitre for Porto, Rashford as well, all picking up 14 goals. That is it. That is the end of today's experiment, guys. This is something that you guys wanted to see, so I hope you did enjoy today's video. If you did, you can go ahead and leave a like on it, and you can also subscribe if you want to stay up to date with all the FIFA 17 experiment and career mode content. But without further ado, guys, I'm not going to waste any more of your time. I'm going to get up out of here because this video might have been a little bit longer than usual. And if EA are predicting correctly, Juventus are going to win this year's Champions League. Keep in mind, if you're watching this at a later date, this was done before Juventus and Real Madrid played. My prediction is 3-2 to Juventus to win it for Gigi, for the classy man himself. Sorry to the Madrid fans out there. It's not that I have anything against Madrid, but I just love Gigi. I can't help it. I love him. Anyway, I said I'm not going to waste any more of you guys' time, so I'm going to get out of here, guys. At the end of the day, I hope you did enjoy today's video. I hope you have a good day. I'll see you guys in the next one very soon. Keep it real. Oh, I love Gigi.